It's time once again for another edition of Talk to Me. And now, here's Emmy himself, 8-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, Maynard Eaton.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to this week's edition of Talk to Me, our regular session with influencers from politics, education, business, and this week, a revered and renowned cultural influencer. His name is Charles Black, an actor and activist. Charles, welcome so much.
Thank you so very much, sir. One of my heroes.
Charles, you're mine. And you are, this has been a historic week from Kamala Harris becoming the first Black vice president Inauguration. But it ends on a sad note with the death of revered, legendary baseball figure Hank Aaron. I know you knew him well. What are you thinking?
Yeah, it is very much a sad loss, and my sympathies and condolences go to Billy, who I knew long before she knew Hank. But it's a sad passing because, again, we're talking about a legendary hero. An icon, not just of a sport, but of humankind. He was a hero in so many respects, and I use him a lot in some speeches that I make when I talk about the value of losing. People are often afraid to lose, and I remind them that although Hank Aaron was the greatest home run hitter, he also struck out more than 3,000 times on his way to make that mark. The reason he was successful was he kept swinging. And that's a lesson for all of us. We fall down, we get up. We strike out, we keep swinging. So he is a great loss to humanity, not just to the area of human and civil rights and sports.
But he meant a lot in that arena as well. Other than baseball, he was a human rights kind of activist, much like yourself. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And he put his money where his mouth was. He and Billy financed, institutions and facilities and causes over many, many years. And that surely is to be admired. I remember him first when he won a TV show called Home Run Derby. They had folk standing at the mound and swinging at mechanically pitched pitches, as I recall. And whoever won one week moved on to the next week. And it was Hank Aaron who ended up winning that competition. And that's when I was first aware of him. That was many, many years ago. Long before you were born, man, most likely.
I don't know. Speaking of activism, you're an actor and an activist. Which one do you, when you look in the mirror, which one do you say you are mostly?
Well, I consider myself a citizen of mankind. I take that very seriously. I think that's activism. The thing that I love so much about the acting profession is it gives you a chance to get in other folks' shoes. You get to play other people that you are not, you never have been, and perhaps never will be. And one of the favorite roles that I played was in a little piece called AM Session, written by a friend of mine for another friend's family reunion. It later became a play and a TV piece with Robert Townsend and a little film on HBO. And I played the role of a homeless man who's on the street, and I encounter this player coming out of his girlfriend's house on his way to his wife, and we have this conversation back and forth. But the long and short of it is that whereas I'm on the street homeless, there is my backstory And the backstory is that I'm homeless because I really kind of lost my mind after I was invited to be honored in Canada for as the psychiatrist of the year. And while I was on my way there or from there, I don't remember. I got the word from back home that something bad had happened. And what had happened was, as I was leaving the house, I attempted to put my cigarette out in an ashtray by the door, and it didn't go out. It fell into a waste paper basket that set the house on fire, killing my wife and my children.
Wow.
And of course, that sent me over the edge, and I lost my mind, took to drinking, ended up homeless on the street. And so the lesson for me in all of that is we don't always know why people are enduring the circumstances that they have to endure. And so we get a chance to walk in somebody else's shoes. We have more empathy for the plight of others. So that's what acting has done for me to a great extent.
How did you get into it? You've done well over 1,000 films or movies or projects, I'm told. How did that start? I mean, what's the...
Well, I don't know if it's been over 1,000, but it's been over 100 or so. I know that.
Okay.
It was quite by happenstance. The daughter of my most recent ex-wife, when she was 10 years old, she's now a PhD and married and got about 4 kids, was in a school play at her school, and they had the leading role, and they videotaped it, and she decided she wanted to be a star. So her mother, we lived in Druid Hills, and her mother enrolled her in a class in Marietta. So we would kill time, while she's in the class, go out and get something to eat or what have you. And the instructor finally suggested, why don't we just stay and participate in the class? And the upshot of that was that I was the one of the 3 that he encouraged to get into the game, And at first I thought he was really talking about my voice because, he made comments about my voice. But he said, no, in front of the camera for a bit. So I wasn't interested in that. And about the 3rd time around, he taught me into getting a headshot and getting it out. And I did that. And within a week and a half or so, I got a call in to do an audition. And I went in, and the first person I auditioned for was Reuben Cannon, who was co-executive producer with Tyler Perry. But at the time, he was a big casting guy in Hollywood and had been so for quite a while. And the role was that of a prison psychiatrist. And I did my little lines and all that. And he was very complimentary on my audition and said, "How long have you been in the business?" I looked at my watch. I said, "About 5 minutes now." So based on his encouragement and the fact that I walked out of that room and auditioned in another room and was cast for that role in a movie called Carolina Skeletons that starred Louis Gossett Jr., I decided, this is pretty cool. And that was a 1-day shoot, but it was a union film. I worked 16 hours. So, after 8 hours, you get paid time and a half for 2 hours and then double time after that. So I made a nice little paycheck and I said, I can do this, So as a result of that, I stuck with it. And here I am 30 years and a half later, still doing a little bit here and there.
Well, we applaud you. But now the activist side of you started when you were a student of Martin Luther King Jr. Is that correct? I mean, I didn't know that until hearing you on a show the other day. A student of MLK?
Yeah, well, my activism started before then. But at the time that I had this class, there were only 8 of us in the class. Julian Baum was one of those people. I was chairman of the Atlanta Student Movement at that time, succeeding Lonnie King, who was our founding chairman. And Dr. King only taught this one class, only class I think he ever taught anywhere on Morehouse's campus, and it was called a seminar in modern social philosophy. And I think the reason he was given this class to teach was because, civil rights doesn't pay that well. You need a little money. Right. And I think that was Dr. Mays' way of letting him earn a little extra money. But the class was quite inspiring, and, just 8 people in the class, you sit around in a semicircle. And we were dealing with all the great philosophers that had influenced King, that he talked about a lot. Reinhold Niebuhr and talked about Gandhi and Jesus, and Aristotle and Plato and all those guys. And I've often told people about the one thing that he and I contested a little bit about in that class was Plato and Socrates' philosopher king concept. They both held that people were born essentially to certain pursuits in life. Some might be soldiers or craftsmen or whatever, and the wise folk, the philosophers, should be the ones who rule. And philosophers at that time, of course, were great scientists as well as great theoreticians and the like, philosophers. And so I took the position. I thought that was a good idea, that you shouldn't have dumb people in charge. Only smart folk ought to be in charge. And of course, King talked about democracy and the one man, one vote and all that. And I've often said that if he had been alive today, he would have agreed with me, Plato, and Socrates. You should not have dumb people in charge. But that was a part of my class experience with Dr. King.
Well, you certainly not dumb, that's for sure. As chairman of the Atlanta student movement and the appeal rights that you and Lonnie King put together, tell us about that. That was Atlanta's civil rights movement at home, right? Was it not?
Yeah. There's a long story to be told about all that, of course, but we were inspired, of course, by the four guys in Greensboro when they did that sit-in. Now, right. you have to understand that we were the generation that followed what Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation, which meant that our fathers, our uncles, and the like had gone off overseas to fight to make the world safe for democracy, only to come home and be called niggers and to be treated like trash, even in some instances to be lynched while wearing uniform. So we were, as Dr. Mays said in his book, we were born to rebel. So we were already mad and wanted to change things. And when we saw what the boys in Greensboro had done, that gave us a way, of dealing with these situations. We saw that as an effective means of addressing the social ills that we were already upset about. So when Lonnie King and approached Julian Bond with Lonnie's friend Joe Pierce at what was Yates and Milton drugstore, and he asked Julian, "Have you seen this article?" And Julian said, "Yes, I've seen that." And Lonnie said, "Don't you think we ought to do that here?" And Julian said that, "Well, I'm sure that someday somebody here do something like that." And Lonnie said, "No, us. Why don't we do something?" He said, "You take this side of the drugstore, and Joe, you take this side." And that's how they started. And after that, he came over on campus, and I was walking through campus. He encountered me and told me that he was calling this meeting for that night in the Sale Hall Annex on Morehouse's campus and inviting me to come. And there were maybe a dozen and a half to 2 dozen of us in that meeting. And he talked about his vision of the Atlanta's situation and this particular technique. And he asked everybody who was there, if you're not, ready to do this, it's a nonviolent protest, just going about your business and don't talk about it, because we wanted to plan it in secret, so it'd be more impactful as a surprise. And somebody did talk, and it got back to the presidents of the colleges, and so they called us in and initially tried to talk us out of it. They were concerned, of course, about funding for the institutions, about their fiduciary responsibility, but also their obligations to our parents and their responsibility of providing us an education. So it was not a nice thought for us to go out and get killed, or to go to prison and all that. But after they were convinced that we intended to proceed with our plans, Dr. Rufus Clement, who was president of Atlanta University at the time, suggested that if we were going to do this thing, we ought to let the city know why we were doing what we were doing. And this led to the publication of a document that was called An Appeal for Human Rights, which was basically written by Dr. Rosalind Pope, who was president of the student body at Spelman at the time, English major and all. Several of us were asked to work with her. But she couldn't locate, and she wrote the thing. So it was published as a full-page ad in the Atlanta Journal and the Atlanta Constitution and the Atlanta Daily World, and then was picked up and run free in the New York Times and also a paper in L.A. As full-page free ads. It was later read into the congressional record by Senator Jacob Javits of New York. So it was a week after that we had our first sit-ins, which involved about a couple of hundred of us going to 11 different places in downtown Atlanta at exactly 11 o'clock on March 15, 1960. Yeah. So that's how we got started.
Now, you're featured in a forthcoming book just been released, I understand, called 9 Days, The Race to Save MLK Jr.'s Life and Win the 1960 Election, because Martin Luther King Jr. marched with you, Lonnie, maybe for the first time ever in Atlanta. Is that correct?
That is correct. A little backstory on that. Dr. King had agreed with his parents and the established Black leadership of the day that he would not get involved in the Atlanta civil rights activities. Their attitude essentially was, we got this. We don't need Junior to lead us. And so he had honored that commitment. And this, as of October 19th of 1960, our movement had been going on since March. So that we were losing a little flour and steam in the community, and people wanted to go back shopping again and all that. And Lonnie mostly felt that we needed a spark in our movement, and we knew that if Dr. King got arrested, that would bring a lot of attention to our cause. It was also 2 weeks before the 1960 presidential election between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. It was kind of that time of the year. So Dr. King agreed to go to Rich's department store with Lonnie and a bunch of other students and to get arrested. And that became national news and international news for that matter, because King had been arrested before for driving in Georgia in an automobile with a Georgia license plate while he still had his Alabama driver's license. That was the pretext, but he was actually stopped because there was a white woman, Lillian Smith, the author, riding in the front seat with him, and Coretta was in the back seat. He was taking her to a doctor's appointment, I think it was. So when he was arrested, it was in DeKalb County, and I went to the trial. Attorney Don Hollowell was the attorney. And when he pleaded Dr. King's case, Judge Mitchell was sitting at the bench sideways, flipping through a comic book, not paying any attention to anything Hollowell said. And then when he rested, he turned to him and said, "You finished? 4 months." And he sentenced King to 4 months in jail. But the sentence was probated. So that when King was arrested at Rich's on October 19th, it was in violation of the probation in DeKalb County. Some of us really hadn't thought about that, hadn't made that connection. But anyhow, so DeKalb asked Fulton to hold him so they can come pick him up and make him serve out his 4 months. And he was sent to Reedsville State Prison, a very, very notorious prison, one of the most notorious in the South at that time. And he was taken in the middle of the night without knowledge of his family or his attorney at like 3:30 in the morning in the back of a paddy wagon while he was chained, while he was cuffed, and there was a German Shepherd dog that was loose in the back with him. And King was knowledgeable about the reputation of Reedsville, where guards were known to allow prisoners to fight even to the death and would themselves beat people mercilessly. So he said after that experience that was most afraid he'd ever been in his life. Long and short of it is that while Nixon and his people were trying to decide if there was anything they ought to do about this situation, the Kennedy folk, with the suggestion of Louis Martin, a black guy who was with the National Democratic Committee and worked with Kennedy and Wolford and Bobby and all, and so they agreed that JFK would call Coretta and express his concerns. And Bobby called the judge and asked the judge to let King out on bond. And when that was done, at the time, Kennedy was trailing Nixon by double digits, a couple of weeks before the election. But when that happened, they published something that they call the Blue Bomb. And you can find this online. And what it did was to set forth what had happened. And in their statements in there from Daddy King, from Coretta, and from ML, and from Dr. Garnett Taylor. And so Daddy King, and let's see, and Reverend, and Abernathy, yes. Daddy King had said that, I'm not sure I can support a Catholic, for president. You have to remember that Martin Luther King was named for Martin Luther, the preeminent Protestant, who was protesting the Catholic Church. Their name had been Michael. So Daddy King changed their name to Martin Luther, in honor of that Protestant stalwart. So he wasn't sure he could support a Catholic. But after this had happened, Daddy King said in this document that in spite of the fact that Kennedy was Catholic, he was going to support him. And what happened was the Kennedy campaign distributed these this was on blue paper, which is why it was called the Blue Bomb. They distributed in all large cities that had significant Black populations. And as a result of that, the Black vote turned around to a great extent from voting for Republicans out of loyalty to Lincoln and all, and voted for Kennedy in very large numbers, about 65% of the Black vote, as I recall. And Kennedy won by less than one vote per precinct nationwide, 100,000 votes. He beat Nixon by, and this was the reason that happened. The arrest of King in Atlanta at Richard's department store, and these subsequent events that followed. That's how Kennedy got elected, and that's a little known story. But it's extremely well detailed and documented in the book that you just mentioned, which is called 9 Days, to Save the Life of Martin Luther King and Win the 1960 Election. The book is now available. It came out this month. I think it's generally available. This was an advanced copy that I got. It's a very scholarly presentation. This book should be in every library and in the curriculum of college campuses and perhaps high school campuses as well. Tells a very important story.
So we talk about that election. We also mentioned the impact, influence of the Black vote then, and certainly now here in Georgia and across the country with the election of our first Black female vice president. And women have always played a central role as foot soldiers and key participants in the civil rights movement. One of your friends, Carol Banks, just to name one. But now, your thoughts about this young lady who's now Kamala Harris, now vice president. What does that say? What does that mean to somebody like you who's been writing, reporting, and being an activist all your life?
Well, I tell you, it was just kind of an earth-shaking moment for me. Some folk will mention that she is the first Black female to be vice president. She's also the first Black person, to be vice president. I think that part gets lost there a little bit. And she was a combination of Jamaican and South Indian, East Indian. I'm sorry. So it seems that we're making a bit of progress here. We felt the same way, of course, when we elected Barack Obama twice. I was interviewed at the time by CBS. Lonnie King and I were, and I remember saying with tears in my eyes at that time that Obama was calling us to our better angels. And this last guy we had was probably among the worst human beings ever to live, not just the worst president of this country. This is a man who crossed the Rubicon to make a deal with the devil, to destroy our democracy. In my opinion, to appease Putin, to whom he owes and his oligarchs over there hundreds of millions of dollars, which is why you'll never hear him criticizing Putin. He couldn't afford to. And I think his efforts to destroy our democracy was a part of the way of his trying to pay off Putin. So he had no concern for citizens and the Constitution. His only two concerns were prison and Putin, and to move beyond that creature to a really good man in Joe Biden and a very good and special and smart, strong woman like our new Vice President Harris. I mean, It was like, we've been waiting to exhale, Maynard, for 4 years.
That's true.
And
That's true.
all of a sudden we could say, phew,
Right.
that maybe this place is going to be saved. There's perhaps some redemption on the horizon. It's a really good feeling, I tell you. I think my blood pressure went down by 10 degrees at least.
Mine too. Charles,
Yeah.
but I tell you something else that struck me on Inauguration Day. Joe Biden's the first president I ever heard to mention white supremacy, domestic
Yes.
terrorism, and make
Yes.
racism a top priority. That was
Yes.
mind-boggling to me and
That was
refreshing.
powerful. That was powerful, and it made me remember when Lyndon Johnson said, we've got to overcome this, we got to overcome that, and we shall overcome. Oh my God, that shook my heart. I mean, he was speaking the anthem of the civil rights movement, and Joe Biden was essentially saying the same thing, that we're facing all these terrible things and we shall overcome. We're not going to allow that to stand. And whereas Republicans are saying, well, let's say that was a bad thing and all that. But we ought to move on and have some unity and reconciliation. No, you can't move on from something like that. Here's this man elected to the highest office in our land, the commander in chief of our military forces, inciting an insurrection against our country. You don't let that move on.
Right.
You impeach and indict him, and convict him whenever and wherever he is. This man needs to be prosecuted in every court that has jurisdiction. I'd like to see him spend the rest of his life in jail, and all of his economic resources be taken from him and given to whoever he exploited along the way. You don't let that move on, because whereas he's out of office, there are other prospective Trumps, who might end up in this position one day. And the message to them would be, yeah, you can get away with just about anything you want to do. And you can do the worst possible things in your final days in office. And, we're not going to convict you because, you're almost gone anyhow. No, No, we cannot let that stand. And I think the Biden administration understands that this has to be crushed. This whole notion of sedition and domestic terrorism, an insurrection against this nation of ours, cannot stand. And it must be very clear. And it applies to all those folk in Congress as well, who knowingly were promoting the lie, about their own elections. The part of the election that involved their getting to Congress, that part was all right. But the part that involved Biden and Harris being elected, that was a fraud. That was what kind of crap is that? They should have declined their election if they're going to disregard the facts about the election of the president. It just makes no sense. And they should all be expelled from Congress. They should all be prosecuted. These folks took an oath on the 3rd of January that they violated on the 6th of January. Knowingly.
Right. That's true.
They're supposed to be protecting and defending this nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And what do? They go into the chamber that had just been vandalized, where they themselves were threatened, by a group who came to lynch the vice president of the man from their party, and they're looking for Nancy Pelosi. 5 people die, and they said, let's move on. And the election was not valid. What kind of foolishness is that? This is an election that was certified by all 50 of the states and the territories of this nation. It was challenged in the courts of 60 judges. The Supreme Court threw it out. The Electoral College confirmed the results. And they're going to say, no, we need to look at this some more because, this election was not. What kind of foolishness is that? This is the land of the free and the home of the brave. This is a democracy, not a dictatorship. And whereas Trump is a dictator, despot wannabe, that is not what this country is. And it has to be clear to everybody here and everybody throughout the world. And that's not who we are.
Charles, you can tell you're very passionate about politics. In fact, you worked in politics for several mayoral elections as well. But this really disturbs you, does it not?
Oh, yeah, very deeply, very deeply, very deeply. I feel invested in this country. You
Yeah.
know, I've made some sacrifices, as did many, many others, to a far greater degree than I. And I'm not planning to leave here to go somewhere else. I want this country to be right, to live up to its creed, to its promises. Martin King would say, "Somewhere I read." you know, we're supposed to be a land where justice rolls down like a mighty stream. This is a land where all men are created equal, and they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the plaque at the Statue of Liberty, it says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shores. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." That's the America that I dream of. That's the America that I want to protect. Not the one that says, if you're white, you're right. I think one of the most powerful things about the inaugural ceremonies was that mosaic of America that was shown, where people all over the
Yeah.
country, all different kinds of looks, different ages, different sexes and sexual orientations, and cultures and religions, relative abilities, and all that were displayed as the America that we really are. Not the America that the bigots want us to be, but these people are who we are. And they all deserve to be represented fairly and equitably. And that's what we got to keep fighting for. There's an expression that I've never liked. We talk about America being a melting pot. That's not a dream of mine. You're talking about a mush. I like I like a metaphor of a smorgasbord, or a salad bar, something like that, where everything is distinctly different, but you're going to enjoy all of it. And a cucumber doesn't have to be a tomato, and a piece of chicken doesn't have to be a piece of tuna. They're all, valid in their own distinct individualities. So that's the America that I love. So everybody doesn't have to be a white male. You can be a black female and be vice president. How about that?
How about that? Charles, I want to ask you about your days as being editor of the Inquirer, but I think most appropriately, since we're talking about politics, wearing an ode to John Lewis, "Get in good trouble." Is that correct?
Yeah, as my shirt says, it says, "Get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble." Got John Lewis's signature on it. John Lewis, by the way, Julian Bond and Lonnie King and I formed a consulting firm together back in 1969 called Frontiers Unlimited. So our relationships and associations go way back. I feel a great sense of loss with the passing of John and Julian and Lonnie. Just losing too many heroes. Others that were in the trenches with me, like Frank Holloway, Ruby Doris Smith, who at age 25 died of illnesses that should have been treated in the hospital when she chose to go to prison for the cause of human rights and justice. A lot of these people that I can think of who are no longer with us. So it's quite a loss. It's quite a loss. But John made his mark while he was here, a mark that will endure for a very, very long time. And I was impressed with your interview of Kwanzaa Hall the other day, and he was talking about his 1 month service in Congress. And that young guy did a lot of stuff in that 1 month. He took it more seriously than some of those folk who've been there for years. He's trying to serve his constituents. He's trying to be heard on the floor, introduce legislation, sign on to other folks' legislation for good. I was very much impressed with that. So we have to take our opportunities seriously when we have them, and try to make the best of our moments in the sun.
Charles Black, we applaud you for the mark you made, the moments you had, and the contributions you made to Atlanta and to the world. It's been an honor to talk to you, sir. Take care.
Well, it's an honor to be with you, my man, with your 8 Emmys. I don't have any Emmys.
See you next
He's just
week.
like you when I grew up, man.
God bless you.
Take care, my friend.
Thank you.